The hound of the Baskerville family, Victor Van Baskerville. According to the words of a hound devoted to his family and father, he was falsely accused in connection with the Demon Clan and sentenced to execution by guillotine. Already there, he decided that in the next life, by all means, after catching his victim, he would never be a hound again. Making this decision did not stop him from dying, and a large blade slashed his neck. He was in the dark for a moment and immediately opened his eyes in a dark room. His body suddenly became heavy, and it was very noisy around, and someone was crying, squeaking. He tried to turn his head, but found nothing to catch his eye on. For a second, he even thought he was in hell. The great Baskerville family estate was very noisy tonight. The patriarch of the Baskerville family, Hugo Le Baskerville, walked around a lot of cradles throwing comments like garbage, insignificant creatures at every crying child. In his authoritative opinion, all children were ordinary, not a single special child. The patriarch was already heading for the exit, but his attention was attracted by a kid who was completely silent and looked at everything around calmly. The man immediately drew attention to him, did not look long, and ordered the maid to move the children to the cradle of sorts. Hugo Le Baskerville is the main suspect in the false accusation of the protagonist and his execution. Now the man looked young, so there was no doubt the main character was none other than Victor Van Baskerville, regressing at the time when he was a child. If he lived his past life as a hound, born out of wedlock, who was trained as garbage, the hound must be devoted to its mission. Murder, reconnaissance, ambush, threats. The hound needs to do all the dirty work, all in order for the Baskerville family to become the best among the 7 families. The reason for his devotion was simple. He wanted his family and Hugo to recognize him. 10 years after the opening of the gates to the demon world, the battle with the demons ended with the victory of mankind. The hound's reward for faithful service throughout his life, only the deprivation of life. There was a reason why he was executed. The hound knew too much. He would never live such a life again. After all, now he wants to take revenge, but nothing will come of the newborn's body. If the baby is transferred to the cradle of swords, then this will be a good opportunity to become stronger. Now it's just necessary. Children born in the Baskerville family must pass the test. They are thrown into a maze with swords, which they must pass and get to the river Styx to explore their talent. The river Styx is legendary and famous for turning Ted's children into iron ones. However, there is a limit to how many children it can affect. To get to the river Styx first, you need to move against the spiral wall of blades. In a previous life, my relatives ousted me, and I was unable to get the desired effect. But this time it will be different. He intends to monopolize the blessing of the river as much as he can. When the trial began, the boy did everything as planned. He stayed away from everyone, crossing the maze in defiance of the spiral wall, and ended up in the river Styx, one of the first. Water seeps deeply into the body through the cuts. To think that the great beginning changes so much. The boy, having sunk almost to the very bottom, clamped his nose and mouth with his palm, intending to hold out as long as he could. No matter how much it hurts, he needs to hold on. Servants were bustling at the water's edge. They all thought that their master needed to surface. If he stayed underwater for too long, he would die. They urgently needed to get him out. The patriarch stood nearby laughing unpleasantly and asked their head butler John Barrymore how much time had passed since the dive. It was already 7 minutes, and if the child stays in the water, he will obviously die. Patriarch Hugo approached the water and said that his son could already rise to the surface. But the baby was not going to give up just like that. He continued stubbornly not to inhale air and water while listening to the nasty voice above. The water from the river Styx needs to be absorbed by him as much as he can. So the baby began to suck it noisily with his mouth, but immediately choked, starting to choke. It was still necessary to hold on with all my might. He kept repeating the same thing to himself as he was already falling to the bottom and drowning. Hugo pulled him out of the water in time by grabbing a child's foot. Apparently, one stay in the Styx River was not enough for the boy. He even drank it, and now his teeth have already grown. The patriarch clarified the boy's name, and when the butler Barrymore told him, it grinned. Apparently, young Mr. Victor Van Baskerville was born a very greedy son, as Hugo himself decided. Victor continued to squeal as a baby, but even then he realized that now he needed to use the time to sharpen his fangs. As soon as the time comes to tear off the head of his master, the Baskerville family will disappear from the pages of history. By the efforts and hands of Victor Van Baskerville, illegitimate son of Hugo Le Baskerville, Victor Van Baskerville. At the age of 8, he was talented enough to be called a genius, but in his family he was considered ordinary. At the age of 12, he took missions of assassination, espionage, and conquest. At the age of 29, he felt that he had reached his limit in the art of the sword compared to his direct descendants. At the age of 30, the gates to the demon world opened, announcing the beginning of the invasion of the demon clan. At the age of 35, he survived the era of destruction, slashing monsters left and right. And at the age of 39, the long war finally ended with the victory of people. At the age of 40, he was rewarded for his loyalty, and the reward was slander, false accusation, and execution by guillotine. The boy woke up again in a dark room after the patriarch pulled him out of the river Styx. Judging by the fact that he was lying in the nursery, the boy successfully absorbed water from the river Styx. Now he has a better starting point than before. Behind him, a quiet female voice was heard wailing about something with disgust and mentioning Madam, who for some reason keeps bad things in Mr. Vicker's bed. The boy knows that no one gave gifts to an illegitimate child. The maid put the box by the playpen and hurried away. Vicker cautiously turned over on his back. A dark aura emanated from the box and nothing good could be expected. The lid opened and immediately 2 bloody mambas crawled out on the bed. The baby wondered if she had sent him such rare snakes to kill. Few in the Baskerville family can be addressed as Madam. Whoever that person is, she most likely wants to reduce competition. The kid got down on one knee, staring at the approaching snakes. They can kill every child in the nursery, which is to be expected from the Baskervilles. The kid grabbed the snakes' bodies with his small hands and squeezed them with all his strength. He will destroy this family with his own hands. The next day, the people of the Baskerville family were amazed when they found a child sleeping peacefully next to the dead snakes. All the nannies who took over that night were tortured and then executed. However, the reason for the appearance of snakes remained unknown. Only the young hound knew the truth. But 8 years have already passed, and the grown-up Vicar is sitting among other teenagers listening to a lecture about what, so, he knows. The teacher announced that the young gentleman would study the levels of the sword art today. If someone can't fill a sword with mana, then you are considered a beginner swordsman. If you can pour a small amount of mana into the sword, then you are an advanced swordsman. When you are able to cover a sword with mana, the aura of which is like liquid, then you are a sword expert. And finally, when they are able to cover the sword with a solid aura, the shape of which can change arbitrarily, then you are a master of the sword. The strongest of the Baskerville family, Sir Hugo, is just at this level. If Hugo was already a master of the sword at that time, then Vicar needs to restore his former strength before the coming-of-age ceremony. The teacher noticed that young Mr. Vicar was in the clouds again, but the boy didn't care about it. He gained incredible physical strength by diving into the river Styx for 7 minutes. While the teacher teaches him one thing, he learns 100 at once. The patriarch will be extremely glad and happy to learn about his successes. The boy is much more talented than the others. However, what really concerned the young Vicar was the question of how many years it would take him to kill Hugo. There was no peace waiting for him after the lesson. The notorious Hugo Le Baskerville triplets. They were the ones who in a previous life stabbed in the back when Vicar was running away, having received slander in his address. He knows them well. The children pushed the boy into the wall, throwing insults like garbage, and at the break began to ask about rumors. They say you plunged into the river Styx for as much as 7 minutes, and strangled 2 snakes to death when you were a child. Vicar pursed his lips when the boys, not hearing his answer, caught him in a lie and admitted that they did not like him. Not that Vicar liked them much. He knows very well that when these guys grow up, they will be a pain in the ass. Maybe it's worth putting them in their place right now. A small dagger poked the tip of the blade into the young gentleman's chest, and he looked at him thoughtfully without a shadow of fear, waiting for further actions. Of course, these children have heard that if you stay in the river Styx for a long time, then your body becomes like steel, which means that you shouldn't be wounded by blades. You can't. One of the triplets thought that if he stabbed Vicar, he wouldn't die. Lubero and Hybero grinned at each other. One of them covered Vicar's mouth with 2 palms, not paying attention to the fact that the boy did not even resist. He uttered the words that he would eat his hand if Vicar's garbage lasted at least 3 minutes in the Styx River instead of the 7 that lasted. The boy's palm blocked all Vican's airways. The triplet brothers began to wait for the boy to start choking and give up. Vicar understood that these children were very cruel, but he could not refuse to play along with them a little. All 3 of them were grinning, considering that the information about 7 minutes in the river Styx was complete nonsense. 3 minutes later, they were convinced that Vicar was pretty good. 10 years have passed and each of them was convinced that it was all true. Vicar stood as if nothing had happened for 10 minutes without a drop of oxygen, and this introduced the triplets into incomprehensible emotions of fear, surprise, and pleasure. While they were agreeing to let him go and let him breathe, Vicar decided that he had already amused them enough and the performance could be finished. He clenched his sharp teeth on the soft skin of a child's hand. A second later, Lubero, who was holding him, fell to the floor clutching his hand without one finger. Vicar spat out the soft flesh on the floor with contempt. Everyone immediately retreated, wondering what this guy was doing. But Vicar was calm. He smiled, rubbing the blood on his cheek, and asked if it wasn't one of them who wanted to eat his hand. Two of the triplets were skeptical and expressed their lack of fear, which cannot be said about the third, which Vicar held. He felt sorry for his bitten finger with tears in his eyes. The three of them were going to go to the priest to get the finger back, but Vicar was not going to let them go. He definitely wanted to play to the end, and when the daredevil with a dagger in his hand rushed to attack him, reminding him that he was older than Vicar, he did not move. Steel flashed through the slit in the jacket and the triplets froze in amazement. Vicar grabbed the hand with the weapon and twisted it, hissing maliciously that it seems that they all forgot something. For example, that they are Baskerville. Their talent and strength do not depend on age. It is necessary to finish to the end, so Vicar, without waiting for the reaction of the offenders, sent Hybero to the knockout with an accurate uppercut. The boy fell to the floor all smeared in blood, and the second brother followed him, who decided that he was able to fight back. The only one who seemed scared was the one who was now sitting without a finger. Vicar was calm and cold. He knew exactly what he would do and how. The guys will definitely get better as soon as they are treated. They do not need to be afraid so much. But he does not intend to let them go until they experience discomfort with their whole body. Vicar picked up a dagger from the floor and said that he would be generous, let one of them go. The brothers visibly perked up after hearing this news. Everyone would like to get out with minimal damage. Vicar casually threw the weapon at their feet so that the triplets themselves would decide which of them would be more lucky. He won't be waiting long, so they'd better hurry. Surely one of them must survive. The hero grinned with a distraught expression. He was frightening and radiated danger. So Baskerville's Newt began to split up. Butler John Barrymore came to the Patriarch to report on the latest news. There was another bloody situation involving the Moore clan and the Ruby Mine. The Moore clan declared the mine's territory their own. The Patriarch took it calmly, because he knew that the Moore clan would come to them and the opportunity to discuss this issue would be provided soon. With regard to the interim assessment of the Fortress of Youth, the news interested him much more. The news that Mr. Vicar received the highest score for the written exam was pleasing. In 5 days, the practical part exam will begin in the Fortress of Youth, and the Guardian Knights have already vacated the room for this. In this case, the fortress will be completely free and everything will go well. No one thought that the next meeting of Patriarch Hugo and Mr. Vicar would happen so soon. A report about a recent serious fight between students contributed to this. Although there were no deaths, Mr. Hybero's teeth were almost completely knocked out, Mr. Middleborough's jaw was crushed, and Mr. Loughborough's index finger was chopped off. Of course, they recovered after the treatment, but the resulting physical injuries seemed significant. It was clear that they wouldn't fight among themselves because of their closeness. There was a conflict with another young gentleman, the one who injured the triplets. This is an 8-year-old young Mr. Vicar, who received the highest score on the written exam. After a while, Vicar himself stood in Patriarch Hugo's office, cheekily smiling. Since their last meeting, the boy has grown a lot. The Patriarch noticed this. Vicar greeted him respectfully, but Hugo immediately got down to business, asking about the 3 guys the boy had injured. Vicar didn't get nervous at all. He just said that if he was told about his brothers, they had received treatment, even if they meant not physical injuries at all, but mental ones, because of which the triplets now eat separately from each other and do not even talk to each other. Before that, their technique was quite tolerable, but now the relations within the group have broken down. The Patriarch was wondering what Vicar himself thinks about this, whether he feels guilty and whether he thinks that he did wrong when he decided to lead his brothers to collapse. The boy only replied that this was not the case at all. He was stronger, and how could the one who was stronger be wrong? It turned out that the triplets came to the Patriarch a little earlier, and said that they kindly forgive him for the offense. However, Vicar still did not feel guilty about himself, and he had good reasons for this. The boy remembered what happened in his life before his regression. The youngest daughter, whose life was ruined by the Baskerville clan, Hugo's fiancée. She became a nun and many years later told Hugo that she forgives him and invited him to Mass. After that, Patriarch Hugo replied to her that he believes that forgiveness is only an excuse for weak people who are unable to take revenge due to lack of strength. Hugo praised Vicar for understanding the family motto well, because only the strong will reign supreme, and weakness is a sin. He ordered Barrymore to allow the boy to take any food from the storage, as much as he could carry, even chocolate, which the boy wanted. Finally, he addressed him as my son and told him to try at the intermediate assessment so as not to lose to direct descendants. Victor was standing with Barrymore, the butler, and several cooks at the warehouse. There was a famous chocolate that the gourmets of the Morgue clan enjoy. Chocolate of the highest quality, which they hardly got. The boy calmly interrupted the man's story, because he needed something completely different. He asked for cocoa beans with a rich aroma and was pleased when he was presented with a whole bag of them. They were blood beans, known for their flavor. One such bean is enough to produce 100 liters of chocolate. Victor tried to bite one off and winced. The butler thought that since the boy eats such bitter beans just like that, he must be very fond of chocolate. He believed that with the restrictions given by the patriarch, the boy had found a way to get as much chocolate as he wanted. The cook who told about the beans offered to process them and send them to Mr. Victor's room, but the boy refused the offer, assuring that he would take them as they are. Victor didn't need chocolate for food at all. The blood beans will be used during the practice exam in 5 days. Then there will be a catastrophe that Rod Baskerville did not know before. In this world, the Baskerville family is referred to as the Berserker family. Children go through harsh training from their youth. As soon as they begin to take their first steps, they must climb mountains to increase endurance. And except in some cases, they cannot lie down and crawl on their stomach. When it comes time to sleep, then, to adapt to the harsh environment, they need to sleep next to the corpse of a monster. Upon completion of this training, they turn 8. From that moment on, the young hounds undergo a death evaluation. That's why they were nicknamed the Berserker family. The time for evaluation and practice has already come. In the mountains located on the outskirts of the territory inhabited by monsters, young hounds gather on the Red-Black Mountains. Young gentlemen will be evaluated and practice quite simply, as the instructor of the Baskerville family, the shadow dog Pavlov van Baskerville, said. It is necessary to hold out there for 3 months and they will have to hunt huge and strong monsters. You need to keep these 2 conditions in mind in order to survive. 10 points are awarded for successful survival. For survival without injury, 30 points. For letting others down and surviving, 50 points. In cases of survival and victory over the monster, 70. If someone fulfills all these conditions, he will receive 90 points. In addition, if someone steals the badge that you all got from someone else, get extra points. If they die, they will get a whole 0 points, and 100 points does not exist here. One could only hope that the young hounds remembered Hugo's lesson that a swordsman dies when he becomes arrogant. They recommend not to leave the prescribed stage and area. Since the Red-Black Mountains are a restricted area and unexplored territories, it is recommended to stay inside the designated area where they suppress monsters. During the exam, shadow dogs will secretly evaluate you. While everyone was listening to Mentor Pavlov's briefing, the crowds did not subside, discussing Victor's persona. Someone was still interested in the truthfulness of the fact that he had been in the river Styx for 7 minutes. Others talked about rumors that he had beaten 2 poisonous snakes in the cradle. The fact that he received the highest score for the written exam also did not escape anyone. Everyone wanted to see if he was really that good at practice. Victor, on the other hand, thought only of the Red-Black Mountains, which he had not been in for a long time. He was standing next to his brothers, so their excitement and fright were noticeable. The exam should begin as soon as the bell rings in the hands of Pavlov, who will pray for their good luck. After the signal, everyone immediately scattered in different directions. Some were in a hurry to occupy a profitable territory that they had looked after last year. Others were plotting to first get attached to someone, and then take away what they wanted to get. The triplets were still fighting among themselves, while the first brother, out of habit, took command of the other 2 were going to cope alone. Pavlov lit a cigarette thoughtfully. This exam does not encourage killing others. It is not forbidden, but it is not desirable. Points will be deducted for the murder, so everyone is trying not to kill anyone. In any case, the shadow dogs will also try to minimize deaths. One of the dogs was watching Victor, who was waving a stick as he approached the restricted area. He knew that he was a genius who had stood out since childhood and was looking forward to how he would show his skills. The boy at this time was examining the soft ground around a fig tree, thinking about something. He has already decided where he will live during the exam, so he should relax and rest. Shadow Dog was amazed at such thoughts, because the boy was going to rest while the others survive. While Victor was looking for dry wood milking the fire, other children were fighting with each other for a good resource. While the boy was drying his jacket and arranging a place to sleep, the brothers all as one fought with the monster bear, risking death. Some time has passed since the guy started to rest, digging a hole and, in addition, hunting for food and collecting everything necessary. If he plans to continue hiding here, then surely the rumors about his genius have been exaggerated. If he's just going to hide, then there's no need to watch him, and that's why the dog left. Vicar knew that he was being watched and was specifically waiting for the surveillance to disappear. When he set up camp in the fresh air, some kind of nostalgia appeared in him. He remembered how, even before his regression, he had set up camp with his team, and then one guy told him that cocoa beans hide a fishy smell, and bloody cocoa beans containing a high concentration of cocoa are the best. The boy calmly threw a handful of stored beans into the fire. The one who was bothering him finally left, and he has already finished the preliminary preparation. It's time to start hunting. A few days later, Vicar reached the Forbidden Zone. Unexplored territories begin from there, but during his time as a scout, he calmly walked through these places. The smell of burning, standing in the nose, was the smell of charred tree roots, so there is a habitat somewhere. Burning excrement lay further down the path, and the boy immediately realized who was waiting for him here. Only one monster leaves such traces behind, and that's a hellhound. During the reconnaissance, he considered them infuriating, but now he is even glad to meet them. The hellhound was a dangerous monster that came from hell. He brought disaster to oncoming people. It was impossible to survive after a bite, and the sulfur flame from his mouth and eyes has gaseous properties and provokes ignition. Living objects will be exposed to the flame, will burn until they disappear. The watchdog monster that consumes hellfire is a hellhound. In the past, Vicar could barely defeat one such individual at the age of 18. Of course, now that he's only 8, victory seems even less likely. However, he knows a way by which even a child can cope with the hellhound. Vicar rushed to the attack, grabbing his sword. The first weakness of this monster is that it moves only in a straight line. It is difficult for him to change directions abruptly. The second weakness is rather strange. Sentry monsters are not able to cross the water, even if there is a very small amount of liquid in front of them. This will significantly slow down the hound. And while she runs, she shows another weakness peculiar to all dog-like monsters. They open their mouths while running. Vicar did everything as he wanted. He spilled some water around and did not move in a straight line, so that in the end he could guess the right moment and throw a piece of bloody cocoa bean into the dog's mouth. Chocolate is a poison for dogs, and when it comes to bloody beans, from which liters of chocolate are made, it is obvious that the monster will not survive this. Vicar believed that even a hellhound was powerless against chocolate. Most likely, the stomach and heart will suffer first. But since the chest organs are protected by strong ribs, you need to aim at a weak point where they are not. The answer is in the kidneys. After destroying a monster, the energy called experience points or karma gathers in the body, making it stronger. In addition, the short sword glows brighter. At this rate, he will be able to rise to his level before the regression. He is already wondering what kind of expression Patriarch Hugo will have when an 8-year-old child brings a monster with a danger level of B+ rank. With this, he has already secured his first place in the practical test and even knows what reward he will ask for. A huge reward that he had never dreamed of asking for in his previous life. He will take it for himself until no one knows its value. He will take only the head from the monster. Suddenly, 3 more of the same monsters came from the side, who wanted to avenge their kinsman after hearing his crying. It was almost touching, but Vicar wouldn't stop at one hellhound. He cut off the head of the dead monster with one swing and shouted to the others that he still had a lot of beans left for their death. The dogs suddenly whined, lowering their heads and clearly scared. Were they afraid of the bloodlust of a simple 8-year-old? Hellhounds will not leave their prey behind, even if it threatens them with death. Vicar turned around and froze in place. Behind him was Cerberus himself, whose danger level is a plus, and he lives on the 7th ridge. It is not clear why he went down to the 1st. The boy noticed that Cerberus was badly wounded, and in addition to numerous wounds, many arrows were stuck in his body. So someone was trying to hunt him. That's right, around the mountain is the territory of the barbarian tribe. If he came all the way here being chased, then this is a great chance. Wounded monster of a plus rank. Vicar must finish him off, no matter what it costs him. Vicar hid his power in the Baskerville house, including the fact that he had already reached a high level of proficiency as an advanced swordsman and had learned the 3rd technique of the Baskerville family. He has already reached the level that other hounds achieve only as adults. Before the regression, Vicar had honed his skills by going through the war against the demon clan to the extent that there was no hint of unnecessary movements in his technique. In addition, the body was strengthened by being in the river Styx. Everything Vicar possessed worked well against a wounded Cerberus. But no, he just thought it was. At the moment when he had already relaxed, Cerberus was able to use his claws and the wounded Vicar flew away coughing blood. Cerberus was also known as the Guardian of Hell, not interested in those who enter the afterlife, but tearing to shreds those who try to escape. Vikir lost consciousness for a while when he took a direct attack from Cerberus. His left arm hurt badly, as much as if it had been torn off. Of course, Cerberus is wounded, but is it really so much that he stopped at just a torn forearm, because of which the arm did not move? Or is it the effect of the river Styx? This does not cancel the injury. The guy will not survive the second blow. A difficult journey, but an experienced hunter must find the best way out of such a situation. The best way out at the moment is to run away with your tail between your legs. If the monster hadn't been injured, then Vikir would have already been torn. It is worth thanking the barbarian tribe in the mountains. If he overcomes the iron fence, he will get out of the forbidden zone. As long as he can get to the prepared place, he will win. But if he is caught before that, he will die. While he jumped the fence and looked around on the run in search of the right place, Cerberus did not lag behind. Vikir jumped, turning over in the air, and the monster's mouth clicked a couple of centimeters from his face. And then it was over. Cerberus landed in the very cradle of swords. Who would have thought that Vikir would use a trap prepared for the Hellhound to fight Cerberus? Cerberus and Hellhound belong to the same type of monsters. The essence of the blood beans that he applied to the wooden spears is poisonous to both of them. Since Cerberus is a high-ranking demon, he will not die so quickly. Vikir threw a spear at the monster and counted off exactly 7 steps and came to a tight one. The monster fell to the ground dead. The thrown spear was different from the others. Attached to this spear was the zeb of a poisonous bloody mamba. After being wounded, no one will be able to take more than 7 steps. The poet boy counted them just to check the veracity of the hearing. It's a good thing he saved the tooth when he was younger. He can already feel the energy from Cerberus. Finally, all 3 heads died. In any case, the question remained how to get the body back. The reason for his death will be more than obvious, so perhaps the guardian knight who saw the guy preparing the trap will become a witness. Cerberus is the guardian of the rat, protecting its territory. He must have been defending his dungeon somewhere nearby. A dungeon that is a mystical place that holds a treasure. Sometimes strong monsters use them as their home. Since the guardian died, the dungeon is now empty. By smearing the feces of Cerberus, he will be able to ward off the monsters. He actually applied the monster's secretions to the fabric. Dried soil, rotten leaves, dead roots, marks, and saliva. Following these tracks, he will be able to find the way to the dungeon. He didn't wander around for long and found a dungeon that was guarded by Cerberus. Vikir recalled that he had been here before his regression. This place will be discovered in 10 years, but it will be completely empty. However, right now this is not the case. The mana then breaking through from under the rotten surface was felt immediately. Vikir was sure that this place hadn't been cleaned out yet. Ruby veins pass through this zone. This dungeon must be connected to the Red All Mountain. Vikir walked into the depths of the dungeon and saw the light that Ruby's mana was emitting. Judging by the old skeletons, someone has already been here. There was a knife wound on the corpse. There were traces of dried blood. He knelt down, picking up a letter from one of the Baskervilles family members from the floor. A certain kind wrote this so that the next generation would not repeat the same mistake. The stone cave in their family was considered a legend. A guy named Abel came across her one day. Together they started a generation of this dungeon full of challenges. After killing many monsters and reaching this cave, they found the main test of this place. They were stuck there for 3 years. Vikir decided that the test was this ruby and the inscription of the riddle on the stone pedestal, which read, when you enter, it's 1. But when inside, it's 2, when you leave, it's 1. Kine and Abel read this text over and over again. Eventually they came to a conclusion. Kine and Abel, twin brothers, were one in the womb, but when they were born, they separated. In other words, in order to take the treasure of this dungeon, they needed to become one again. This meant that only one of them could leave the dungeon with the treasure. After an intense battle, Kine killed his own brother and then there was only one left in the cave. But despite this, nothing has changed. They had definitely gone from 2 to 1, so why Kane couldn't get the treasure wasn't clear. He killed his brother and was shocked by it. After some regrets, he made the decision to leave this place. He wants to tell those who are brave enough to find this place. It is worth leaving it immediately. Kine said in the letter that those who came would receive nothing from the Devil's Cave, existing only to mock people. Vikir indifferently threw the letter back. Although they passed many tests, they left with nothing, and Vikir has no twin brother. The task is exactly the same, despite the fact that he came alone. Consequently, Kine and Abel misinterpreted the text. Vikir repeated the riddle to himself once again, thinking about what her answer might mean. There is no dungeon that cannot be passed, you just need to think carefully. The idea that came to the boy's mind was correct. Kine and Abel were unlucky. Since they came together, they could not solve the problem and went on the wrong track. A dark corridor and a shining stone. The answer to the riddle lies in the dungeon itself. Victor is alone when he walks through a dark passage, but as soon as he approaches the glowing stone, a shadow follows him and there are two of him. The light will go out when it breaks the light source. When he breaks the ruby, then the final test will open. The answer to this riddle is a shadow. The cause of the brother's death is a relic of the Devil's Cave. Only the owners of the Baskerville blood will be able to take possession of Beelzebub. Vicky remembers seeing an illustration in a book as a child before rebirth. Lord of the Flies, Beelzebub, an unprecedented great monster invading the continent in the old legends. The devil constellations are also known as the Seven Calamities. To stop them, the heads of the seven families opposed each of the devil constellations. The demon that the first patriarch of the Baskerville family fought against was the same Beelzebub. The remains of the demon are stored in the Baskerville lands, and the demonic energy of Beelzebub, according to legend, attracts monsters. But no one believes in this legend now. However, the story is true, and this sword was later taken by the demon clan, which led to countless human deaths on the battlefield. This will not happen in this life, because now the sword belongs to Victor. The boy confidently grabbed the sword and pulled it towards him. A sharp pain shot through his arm and several scars appeared on the skin. A blade created from the corpse of a member of the Devil constellation. Victor was lucky to get his hands on Beelzebub. He wonders how much stronger he will become in this life and he can't wait to find out. There was nothing else in the dungeon for him, so he decided to leave as soon as possible. Suddenly he felt dizzy and fell to the floor, shrinking from hunger. Beelzebub asked him to eat something. From the intolerant, his head even turns his stomach because of this. His sense of smell has increased and it seems that he feels something delicious. Suddenly his hand jerked to the side, and Beelzebub himself led him somewhere. He went out to the clearing where the monster he had killed earlier was lying. The blade plunged into the body of the dead man. Since he is now absorbing blood through Beelzebub, he feels like everything is coming back to normal inside. Apparently, he had been starving for a long time. Victor hoped that the vegetation in the red-black mountains had not dried up because of Beelzebub's hunger. It was hard to imagine how much Victor would have to feed him to cure this mania for overeating. Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. It is said that he has the ability to absorb the opponent's skills and appropriate them for himself. Since his absorption capacity tends to infinity, countless people have lost their powers and become helpless. Due to his danger, Victor can only steal 3 abilities. Bleeding Hellhound, a skill thanks to which the enemy does not stop bleeding, even if the wound is very tiny. Beelzebub almost swallowed the entire Cerberus, but Victor stopped him in time. If it had to be explained by the monster's injuries, then he wouldn't be able to. After checking the skills, he was surprised. There was a 3rd slot on the list with the Cerberus Burn and the Hellhound Bleed, the rapid regeneration of the Norwegian sewer rat. Apparently, Beelzebub absorbed the ability of the rat, which was crushed by Cerberus with his carcass. The skill of burns from Cerberus is a wonderful acquisition. Since thermalgia is the worst pain a person can experience, this skill will be even scarier than bleeding. Now that with the preparation of the monster for the practical exam, why not just wait for the end of the test? The young hounds, having completed the exam, returned to the Baskerville house. Then there was an assessment of achievements, according to which the young hounds received shields, swords or pendants as a reward, made from parts of monsters that they caught during the practical part of the exam. One of the monsters caught by the young hound amazed everyone present from the Baskerville clan. Butler Barrymore immediately reported to Patriarch Hugo that Mr. Victor Van Baskerville from the class of 8-year-olds accidentally wandered into forbidden territories during a practical exam and defeated a Cerberus with a plus rank danger level. Even if the Guardian Knights of the Baskerville clan avoid meeting this monster of high rank, it is mentioned that the monster was originally wounded by a barbarian tribe. In addition, Mr. Victor used poison on wooden spears. The butler did not answer the question about what kind of poison it was and how lethal it was that killed Cerberus. He told all the information of their hunting log, and when he wanted to ask the young gentleman personally, he returned to his chambers, saying that he was very tired. The patriarch was pleasantly surprised that the boy was so young, and already a cunning man. Barrymore said he was surprised that it would be Mr. Branch Wang and not Lorela who would be so talented. However, the patriarch quickly corrected him. He is not like the previous patriarchs. Nurturing a hound, he does not pay attention to their kind. It doesn't matter to him whether they come from the main branch or a side branch, as long as they are talented and filled with malice. This means that there may be mongrels in the main branch as well. Barrymore wondered if Hugo was worried about his second son, that he was preparing for isolation training and apologized for the wrong words. Hugo ordered him to call Vicar here. The first thing Hugo asked his son was exactly how he defeated Cerberus. After learning that he only smeared the spears with chocolate, he understood why Vicar asked him so much. He immediately got to the point. It seemed that this communication was not exactly between a son and a father. He also asked that Vicar had not properly answered the butler's questions regarding hunting and said that the boy was studying well, because he automatically replied that the butler was not his master, and since Vicar belongs to the clan, the head of the clan is also his master. As a reward, the corpse of the monster that Vicar hunted will belong to him. Additionally, if he wants, the patriarch can fulfill one request, since he passed the exam the best of all. Vicar immediately replied that he would like to get access to the library of 7,000 messages. The library of 10,000 messages is one of the largest libraries of the empire located deep in the Baskerville clan. Only the patriarch, the second person after him, and his direct heirs have access to it. Vicar wasn't going to insist. If he couldn't, then he would just give up. When he had already resigned himself to the fact that he would have to flatter there secretly, the patriarch said that he was allowed to enter. He said that Vicar should definitely study the 6th Baskerville technique, information about which he would find in the 6th Forbidden Zone, in the depths of the library. It was amazing that the same Hugo would allow a scion from a side branch to get acquainted with the 6th technique of the Baskerville family. There has never been such a thing that an illegitimate child with the second name Wang got the opportunity to study materials further than the 4th technique. But there is no need to be surprised at just the 6th technique. At the moment, Hugo's cultivation level is at the 7th Baskerville technique, and before Vicar's regression, he was able to reach the 9th. The boy has not forgotten about life and discrimination upon birth, so this time he will surpass Hugo, because he will receive the greatest essence of Baskerville, the Book of Mastery of the Art of the Sword, containing the techniques of the first patriarch who defeated the devil. Hugo Le Baskerville himself will give it to Vicar. It is he who will give it. He does not even realize the true value of a random book that he will hand over to the boy. Vicar was in the library of 1,000 messages for the first time. He examined the spines of the books reading their titles and realized that all the books about the mastery of the sword, which he so wanted to get in a previous life, are here. No matter how much mana an illegitimate child of the Baskerville family has, he will not be taught techniques higher than the 4th. In order to make sure that the children who became hounds, they will not bite their master, the Baskerville family has implemented this protective mechanism. The boy approached the stand, on which there was a book without inscriptions all hung with chains with a lock. Who would have thought that Hugo would give Vicar access to a book with the 6th technique? If this had happened before his regression, he would not have believed his happiness. Of course, Hugo allowed this with the expectation that an 8-year-old would not be able to remember everything in one day. Before his regression, he studied a theory superior to the 4th technique until he got bored. This consisted in trying to figure out what was necessary for the 5th technique. After drawing the 4th tooth, it is necessary to stop the flow of mana. Perhaps that's why the boy could not take the 5th tooth. The art of the Baskerville sword. Depending on the stage of mastering the sword, 1 tooth symbolizes the 1st technique, 2 teeth, the 2nd, and so on. And when the tooth is drawn, a special mark, the red energy of the sword appears. Vicar is not interested in the 6th technique anyway, because he came here for another reason. After all, Vicar wants to get a higher stage. The guards were surprised that the gentleman was leaving the library so soon and offered to bring something forgotten from the back of the library. They invited him to stay and look around. Vicar said that before leaving, he was thinking of reading other books, so it's not worth worrying. He turned around, heading up the spiral staircase, and the guards began to whisper that this place was filled with various books, and if they were a boy, they would read books about the art of the sword in the depths of the library, thinking that due to his age, the boy simply did not realize their value. Vicar believed that they could think what they wanted. They don't know that there is a real treasure hidden among the dusty shelves. He quickly found the right book, which was called Ambush, but one page was torn out in it and therefore it was useless for the Baskerville children. But Vicar knows its true value. Before the regression, together with the hound squad to which he was assigned, he found a strange relic in a dungeon on the border with the red-black mountain. It was a page from the sword art book, one single torn page, a page written in the style of the Baskerville family. Hugo, who considered it worthwhile, scoured the entire library in search of the book from which this page was torn. It turned out to be a book on the art of the sword ambush. This book was written by the ancestors of the Baskerville family, and it describes the 10th technique. Hugo, maddened by the desire to learn this technique, unleashed the hounds to find the missing 6 pages. Finding out that they were with the 7 great families, Hugo declared war on them and set his hounds on the dissenters. Sacrificing many, all the lost pages were handed over to Hugo in the reward for all the work done. It was a stupid life. Because of this, Hugo broke through the 7th technique and reached the 9th. Only a mountain of hound corpses and blood remained under him. This is not going to happen in this life. The hound that brought all the pages together is Vikir. Therefore, he remembers the contents of all the missing pages. The reason he couldn't overcome the 4th technique was because he didn't have access to the source book. The first step to the 10th technique is similar to the first. Drawing your sword, you need to draw the first path and show aggression. Then the sword will exceed its natural limit. In the eyes of others, this book may indeed seem completely meaningless. But as soon as the torn pages fall into place, false and misleading information is transformed into a masterpiece. In his previous life, Vikir reached the highest level of aura and the highest level of the 4th technique. He needs to reach this level before his 15th birthday. Vikir had been sitting in the library all day intently reading a book and therefore now knew the entire text by heart. He did not feel the presence of the guards. Vikir won't be able to draw the 10th tooth with such a body, but won't he be able to achieve the 5th technique already now? He won't know if he doesn't try right now. His past life was pathetic. After all his efforts, he had reached the highest level of aura, but was unable to obtain a suitable level of sword technique, so the direct descendants were hostile to him. There was only one reason why he couldn't climb the 5th step. He was born in a side branch. Hugo's silhouette from his past life stood before his eyes like a living silhouette, and the boy was ready to shout that he would not live the same miserable life again. He was sure that this was the case and eventually he succeeded. Although still weak, he was able to draw the 5th tooth. It's as if something hot appears from the depths of the heart and strives for the neck. Vikir was so happy when he reached the 5th technique that he almost cried. With a record speed in the history of the Baskerville family, the teeth of a young hound rushed to the soul of its owner. Vikir finally succeeded in drawing the 5th tooth. As long as his mana allows, he will be able to reach the level before regression. It looks like the volume of his mana has increased significantly, having already reached the next level. This flowing aura is a sign of an expert's level. It looks like he has risen from the high level of an advanced swordsman to the low level of a sword expert. The boy could not believe that by the age of 8 he had reached a point that in the past he had reached only by 30. Experts are at a completely different level compared to advanced swordsmen. A dense aura acquires a fluid character. The density also increases, making it easier to use it. Vikir's sword art has become better than before the regression, but he will not stop at the 5th technique, but will go to the 10th with limitless possibilities. The piercing fang that he learned earlier gave him an advantage that allowed him to become stronger in a short time. But this technique also has limitations. However, ambush is an ideal sword technique, smoothly transitioning from attack to defense, and has no restrictions. If he practiced it, he would be able to qualify for the intermediate level of a sword expert. He has a 100% chance of a hidden kill and a 5% chance of a frontal attack. The only question is how much it costs him to show Hugo. Vikir cannot demonstrate too much or, conversely, too little strength. We need to do something that Hugo can be interested in, so that Vikir has enough time to reach the required level. Now it will be difficult for Hugo and the other hounds to reach the 10th technique. Suddenly, guards appeared behind him, who were interested in a strange smell. Vikir quickly changed his face and scratched his head in embarrassment. He lied that he accidentally left a magnifying glass next to the book and set it on fire, and assured that if it had to be reported, he would definitely report everything to the butler. But the men asked him not to worry. It's their fault that they didn't look after Vikir, and besides, it didn't happen with useful books. The boy agreed with them on this and hurried to change the subject of the conversation, asking if they were busy with the issue of the Moore clan and the ruby mines. He doesn't think they have time to deal with minor troubles like this book, so they should assume that nothing has happened. The guards were only too happy about this, and agreed to leave the situation between them by releasing Vikir. Their opinion of Vikir quickly changed, and now they thought that he was courteous, worried about employees, and deserved respect. In Hugo's office, the boy did not wait long for questions about visiting the library, and willingly told that he felt something warm and sharp, but at the same time soft and viscous. Then the others noticed Vikir's aura. Aura is a sign that you have officially entered the world of swordsmen. Even geniuses have to train without rest for 15 years to reach the level of a lower-level advanced swordsman. Hugo did not expect anything from the 8-year-old, but asked Victor to demonstrate his abilities in the test. Everyone gathered in the arena to look at that boy who caused so much gossip and questions. Hugo was going to test the skills of young Mr. Victor with the help of his fight with the monster. A huge orc with a danger level equal to C+ was brought into the arena in chains and locks. In theory, setting an orc on an 8-year-old is akin to murder. He must be at least 15 to handle him, but presumably, if anything, the Guardian Knights will intervene in the battle. Victor wasn't nervous at all and wasn't afraid of the upcoming battle. When the monster rushed to meet him without delay, intending to attack, the boy tightened his grip on his sword with a snort. No one noticed how Victor grouped himself in a jump and inflicted a deep wound in the orc's arm, and then hit him in the leg, inflicting new wounds. The monster flew to the ground without striking a single blow to Victor. The monster must have been surprised to get a cut for the first time. The characteristic skill of the orc's rapid regeneration was also not activated. The monster from the class can't stop the bleeding caused by the Hellhound skill in the class. The crowd was already roaring and whispering. If he's only 8, how can he be so strong? It's only possible with mana. Hugo still wanted to find out what the boy had learned in the library, and Victor was going to show him. Victor hit everyone with a mana blade intending to finish off the crippled monster. Butler Barrymore assumed that this was the aura of a low-level advanced swordsman. He was in a hurry to congratulate Mr. Hugo on the fact that they had just caught the birth of a genius, but Hugo himself was not sure. He thought there was something wrong with the orc, because they are famous for their regeneration. But apparently this one does not stop the blood at all. Hugo decided that the boy had won only because the orc was weak, but Victor surprised him again by asking his father to give him someone stronger than the orc in battle. Everyone was shocked by this question, but Victor thought it was better to show off by force up to a certain point. If he was lucky, his progress would be recognized and he would get rid of Hugo. For example, Victor may be sent to a remote territory or admitted to the academy. It seems that an orc brought from afar is not enough to satisfy Victor. At this age you need to get more life experience. He turned to the butler with a question about the monster they had caught for an experiment during the raid against the barbarians. He has been starving for a long time, so now, most likely, he is on edge, which will be to everyone's advantage. A huge troll was dragged into the arena. Victor only asked if he could start and, having received permission, got down to business. His tactics really surprised everyone. He did not attack immediately, but tried to maneuver between his attacks, creating an exact plan in his head to kill him. The troll has a great regeneration power, so only deadly attacks will work on him. So a plan is needed to hunt a troll. Victor barely dodges the troll's attacks, trying to exhaust him with this, which is not at all like the reflections of an 8-year-old. For Victor himself, the process was eerily slow and did not bring any pleasure. If he uses all his hidden power, he will easily kill the troll, but this will put him in a difficult position. He needs everything to look plausible. For example, using his power against him. With one swing of the sword, he cut off almost completely his arm. But the troll still immediately recovered, since the wound is not fatal. It is supposed to be quite difficult to kill a troll with the first Baskerville technique. It is impressive that the boy is holding on at only 8 years old. Indeed, the first technique is not enough to cut the troll's skin. This individual will die after some time due to the bleeding of the Hellhound, but it will be pointless. Hugo wanted to stop him, because further battle is simply dangerous, but Victor refused. He was close to an epiphany, and if the next attack does not have an effect, then he will surrender. There was a question of how much power Victor would release, but he had already made a decision. He wants to pretend that he had an epiphany during the battle. Hugo's reaction to this was interesting. In the Baskerville Railway Sword Clan, a person's life is formally defined. A clan member will be able to breathe mana into the sword by about 15 years old. Usually the hounds of the Baskerville family remain at the stage of the first technique until this moment. But at this moment, for the first time in the history of the clan, a child of 8 years old reached the second technique, which is usually studied by 18. A week later, Victor was bypassed by everyone, which was not surprising, because in their family, strength is everything. It was nice to see Hugo's stunned face. A moment came to mind when the patriarch could not even answer the butler. Victor demonstrated the second technique in what is at the intermediate level of an advanced swordsman. However, he is actually at the lowest level of a sword expert, and is able to weakly execute the fifth Baskerville technique. With the skill gained from the troll, he is stronger than the average expert. He's definitely started eating more since he got Beelzebub. Both of them have a passion for overeating now. Behind his back, the triplet bastards appeared again and he was angry at this, but outwardly remained calm, asking if they had not had enough last time. The boys were immediately scared and assured Victor that he had misunderstood everything, and they just wanted to say that it was cool that he had defeated Cerberus and a troll. Meat porridge, to which Victor never got used to, almost came out of it with his nose. Talk for peace in preparation for war or some kind of hypocrisy. The boy even got goosebumps. He was so uncomfortable with the triplets and their presence. He wanted to beat them first and then think about it, but he was distracted from this by the butler Barrymore, who grew out of the ground and called him to the office where the patriarch was waiting for Victor. The patriarch sat opposite an older man who was the representative of the patriarch of the Morgue clan. He hoped that this annual meeting would be held without excesses, and Hugo noticed that joint exercises have always been held without problems. However, last year both families had one serious injury, not to say that it was without problems. The children of the Morgue clan seemed to like to dramatize, because their injuries were small scratches. The famous clan of magicians, the Morgue clan against the Ironblood Swords clan, the Baskerville clan. Their relationship wasn't always so strained. Magic and the sword are two sides of the same coin. That's what the last emperor once said. In this regard, the Baskerville and Morgue clans began to conduct joint exercises. Only children from 8 and 15 years old can take part in them. A good atmosphere is maintained during this event. However, there was a problem. There was a ruby mine between the territories, because of which a bloody conflict began. As a result, the relationship between the two patriarchs broke down. But they had to observe the tradition of joint exercises by order of the emperor. Therefore, on behalf of the patriarch, his Bart arrived at the morgue, mentioned that he had heard that a supernova had lit up in the Baskerville family. It was a great blessing of the empire that a talent that appears once in a millennium was born in the Baskerville family. The Morgue clan is extremely lucky. They also have a genius. A young girl named Camus, Rispania, entered the office. The girl looked calm, but as soon as she spoke, her opinion changed. In greeting the patriarch, she began by addressing the thief who stole the ruby mine and demanding to return it. The patriarch reacted calmly, because she is just a child, and he does not need to explain the problems in the education of the children of the Morgue clan. Camus kept shouting for Hugo to give them their rubies back. She can't even do research because they don't have enough stones. After that, Patriarch Hugo became quite angry, calling on Camus to stop his words. It seems that the Morgue family does not teach manners at all. Was afraid for the child, asking what Hugo was going to do to her and was he threatening an 8-year-old. Obviously, the Morgue clan does not teach children not to envy other people's things. Finally, Victor himself came. The girl immediately came up to him, folding her arms on her chest. Victor froze in place because he knew who she was. In Victor's past life, Camus was the iron-blooded empress of the Morgue family, called a genius among the geniuses of the Morgue clan. She nurtured countless great magicians. At the peak of her powers, she defeated all the monsters and barbarians in the Red-Black Mountains and burned them alive on spears, thereby creating the famous border of blood and ashes. In addition, her beauty charmed everyone. She could manipulate even members of the imperial family. They called her the fire goddess of power, but all this is in the distant future, and now she's just a child. Camus asked why the ruby mine belonged to him and not to her. Victor asked if she had really come all this way to throw a tantrum, and this finally drove Camus out of herself. She was going to explain why the mine belongs to 7 morgues and let the cold magic out of her hands. Victor was ready to fight and even thought it would be fun, but when the girl just created an ice sculpture of the territory, he was upset. Camus began her explanation with the mine that is located on the border between the territories of the Morgue and Baskerville clans, in the so-called Joint Protected Zone, from which the best rubies are extracted. The problem is that the entrance to the mine is located on the territory of the Morgue, and the mine itself goes deep into the territory of Baskerville. Thus, the Baskerville clan has no right to appropriate the mine itself. This means that the ruby mine belongs to the Morgue clan. But all the Baskervilles claim that this is a violation of borders and interferes with the extraction of rubies, and also refuse to pay rent for our territory. Victor, seeing the pleasure of his report on the face of Camus, simply replied that rubies are used for magical ingredients and therefore the Baskerville clan does not really need them. It was clear to Victor that it must be a tragedy that there was no idiot in the Baskerville clan who would allow the Morgue clan to freely mine rubies to earn a miserable penny. Although Baskerville is not interested in the rubies themselves, they are interested in their lands, which is why Victor considers it right to say Morgue is not flattery. Only the Morgue clan loses something in this situation. Camus broke into a scream, intending to make Victor understand again who has the right to dispose of the ruby mine. She put one hand on the ice sculpture of the Morgue territory, and the other on the Baskerville territory showing where whose, and then pulled her hand to the Baskerville territory asking whose hand is there. Victor smiled and grabbed her wrist and asked if she was asking whose hand was on his lance. Of course it's his hand. Camus, trying to break out of the tight grip, was still screaming that it couldn't be his and asking why she was his. Victor ridiculously clarified why did Camus decide that she was his. He pulled out a dagger with a bloodthirsty smile and answered her because he said that the hand of Camus was simply his. He immediately jumped up from his chair, shouting, forcing Victor to move away from his niece. The girl broke free and ran to her uncle, starting to cry and wail that he almost cut off her hand. The patriarch did not understand what was happening and simply informed his son that he had gone too far with his jokes. Victor smiled, pressing his finger on the soft blade of a toy knife. These are the usual jokes of the Baskerville family. Victor did not want to bring Camus to tears and sincerely apologized to the patriarch of magicians. In the Baskerville family, they have been playing with such toys since childhood. He was still angry at the situation, but he was quickly distracted by Patriarch Hugo asking if he thought he was getting too involved in children's games, a representative of the Patriarch of the Morgue. Now Hugo has ideas about the Ruby Mine, but first they need to complete joint exercises. Camus tearfully promised Victor that she would never forget this and he should look around now. Joint exercises between the Baskerville and Morgan clans have begun. Children from 8 to 15 years old participate in this event. While 8-year-olds challenge each other in theory or sensitivity to mana, 15-year-olds attract the most attention due to real battles. However, this year the public's attention is directed to a completely different place. The famous clan of magicians, the Morgue clan, Camus Morgan against the iron-blooded clan of swords, the Baskerville clan, Victor Van Baskerville. At the request of the Morgue clan, the battle will be held according to the rules of practical training, and the focus will be on a duel between two geniuses of respected clans. As soon as the duel was started, Camus immediately showed herself, surprising the others by using Quattro casts. She created not one spell, difficult even for 15 years, but 4 at once, and nothing less could be expected from the genius of the Morgue clan, said clearly with pride. Victor successfully dodged all the spells that flew at him and noticed that Camus had quite bright spells, but wouldn't it be better to focus on one? This infuriated the girl even more. She thought that such a jerk who does not understand magic at all would not understand everything and built a sand wall in front of her, but Victor broke through it with one blow. Apparently, it was the Baskerville force that originated from the river Styx. Camus did not start thinking about it at the right time and left her vigilance, so she did not notice the imminent approach of Victor and his strong click on her forehead. The girl did not understand why the opponent just flicked her on the forehead, but she knew that he did not treat opponents lightly. Victor smiled, suggesting that the girl's forehead probably hurts and they could finish everything before the situation got out of control. Camus only built a new sand wall in double size, thinking that the boy would not be able to break through it. Victor knew that there was no point at all if he could get around her, but he decided to play along. He broke through the barrier with his bare hand and reached for Camus' face, asking only one question. I wonder whose hand just went through the wall. And without waiting for himself to answer the hand of the strong, he flicked her on the forehead again, leaving a red bump. He was sure she would give up after he hurt her like that. It seems that dealing with children is much more difficult. Despite the fact that if he wanted to, he could break her neck in a split second, it would only bring trouble. He was wondering how he could calm her down. Perhaps it would be better to let others deal with this issue. One goofy magician keeps calling fire, and a goofy swordsman cuts a path through it. They can be extremely useful. The moment was perfect. The magician behind his back was going to use one of the powerful spells, and the plan matured in Victor's head instantly. He called her by name and jumped, intending to duck. She should have prepared a protective spell. A flurry of fire magic knocked her off her feet.